I'm just preparing my center perpendicular. It's going to go in the middle of a door. Like this one here. This is where I've ended up. I was considering a cross rail here, and that would be a possibility for you if you wanted to do that, but I'm staying at this. I think it's going to make a more modern look. I wanted something that was a little bit more modern, and I'm going to show you some options that you can have along the way. You could go this way. You could put 6 panels in. You could put just the 4 panels. You could divide it right in the middle, whichever way you want to do it. But the procedure that we're going to go through next for making the panels and installing them and everything will be identical. They'll just be cut to different sizes. I took this piece. Can you see my marks on here? What I did is I took this piece from the face of this piece. So I cut this off, ripped it down, and I ended up with a book match piece here. So this is going to go in near the door, and that will just help to balance the wood, which is very important. I think I've done pretty well with some awkward grained wood, but I'm taking this down to thickness. And every surface gets planed, whether it was machined or not. If this was machined with the best performance machines in the world, planers and such, I would probably, unless it was a sanding machine, I probably would still hand plane the surfaces. I've never had a piece of wood go out of the shop that wasn't hand planed. So this is my last surface. I've got the edges square to the front, and now I'm just getting down to nearer to thickness. So my gauge line went along this face here, pretty close. Not enough. I can see these edges, these corners just start to flake. Can you see this here? You can tell when you just get into that last thickness, if you used a cutting gauge, which I did, and not a marking gauge, you get these very thin edges, and you can automatically stop when you see those form. I'll see if I can get one down here for you. Why am I doing this? Well, I'm going to be fitting my tenons. I've already got my doors down to thickness. There it is. Can you see that very thin line there? So I know I'm slightly out of square. When you're out of square, that means I've dipped a little bit further on this side somehow. Instead of trying to cant the plane over this side, just go to one side like this. Take a shaving or two on that side of the plane, then finish off with one in the center, and you'll end up dead on the line. There we are. So that's my piece of wood to size. What I'm going to do here is I want to make sure all my joint lines are closed up. And to do that, I'm just going to put a clamp on and cinch these tight first on each of these. And if need be, just give it a whack on the end, just to shock everything. This is just to make sure everything's seated properly. Can you see that slight gap there? When I pop this, you can hear how tight this is, listen. that's the tenon walls inside the mortise holes. And when I take it off, they stay in place. The joints are all nice and tight. I'm going to check corner to corner for square. Just to see what, make sure I'm square, make sure everything is parallel. This is 17. 16 3/4. So that's what was that? That's 18 and 16 3/4 of a millimeter, and this is 18 and 17. So there's no way I could better that really. What I want to do is make sure here I have the same distances in here, because I can get it square that way, but my shoulder lines could be slightly variable here, and I can still tap these. Like this one is a hair, just a hair under, so I can tap here or I could tap here to make some movement, because there will be a fraction of compression in the tenons in the holes. That did it, that just a little bit there. Which I think is important when we're going through these little steps here, because I'm going to be marking the shoulder lines off this distance in between these in a minute, but I'm still going to check this for square or for parallel here. Spot on, it's really dead on. So shoulder lines. Now I want to make this, in my case, I've got a 1/4 inch deep groove, and I'm just going to go into the main body of wood 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to make 5/8 of an inch my target. So measure up from one end or the other, that 5/8 of an inch. That gives you a cut line, a datum point to start with. Like that. And then place that. You can either go to this inside shoulder here, which is probably the best place to start. So you start right on this inside shoulder. Make sure it's square, of course, parallel. Let me show you here. So I'm going to bring this over here. So I'm right on that line there. And then I'm going to bring my square down inside here and mark that shoulder line. So I've got my shoulder line here. So this is exactly the same as the distance between the two shoulders. And then I'm going to add that 5/8 on here. And that will be my maximum length cut line. So that's the offcut. You always want to check on here. You always want to check here to make sure you have that perfect line. I can cut this to length, and then I can form the tenons, I can form the mortises. Let me cut this to length, get this out of the way. You saw me cut the line all the way around. It's always good to do that, no matter push, pull, stroke, whatever. You don't get any breakout on the outside edge. At least you minimize it. See there, crisp, clean line, a little bit hanging on there. So that's my overall length. I can put my shoulders all the way through. remember we've got a face edge on here. This is my face, and I'm going to run the grooves in here now. And the setting for the plow plane will be exactly the same as we had before. So I'm going to run this along this edge. Am I with the grain or against the grain? Looks good. This is just to get me ready for doing my tenons. Upper body workout. Strengthen your back, your stomach muscles, your arm muscles. Get your breathing going. All good stuff. Make sure this depth stop doesn't move on you. Make sure your fence isn't moving. These things do happen. That's one side. Flip over end for end. Be careful when you clamp here, because you've got those weaker walls now. And that's that. So I've got my shoulder lines here. I could go ahead and cut these because I'm very much governed by this, which gives me the exact position, just as we did before on the tenons. We use this across the end here. That guarantees that first line. But I also had this gauge set with a 1/4 inch chisel, the one I used to cut the mortise, so I can use this here and here and use the walls of the groove to give me the depth. So I can cut these completely, and then I can work. I actually won't fit them, but I can cut them. Cut my shoulder lines. Square all the way around. Don't you love that click sound when it goes in? I love this sound, listen. It's perfect. Same on this one. Not clicking quite. I should go from the other face. I should go from that face, but I've already use the gauge line. I got this exactly parallel, so I'm not worried that these shoulder lines are not going to line up. But this is just a discipline of work, really, making sure that you work accurately so that this corner line comes out right on that corner. Cut your shoulders first. If you do miscut and you end up on the wrong side of the line, you have to trim off the shoulder all the way line, get it perfectly aligned again, and then you may have to move your top rail if you have done that slightly. But because we did cut oversize a little bit on the height, we have enough margin for that. Don't cut into the face of the tenon in the inside corner. Stay away from the corners. It's very important not to undersize your piece of wood. So this is my outside face. So I'm going to cut on the waist side of the line. I'm going to leave a little bit of wood on and then go down with my router. Listen, you want to not cut into the shoulder line if you can avoid it. Same on this one, cut it fat, because you can always trim off very easily with the router or a chisel. My fingers are on here, they're pushing this into the face of the plate now, just to add a little bit of friction. Accuracy really matters, this sharpness, this technique, all of these things. They all matter. It's how you work. Oops. Stay in there. This is where you have to be careful. Let me show you right in here. If I push through here, I'll break this inner edge. So you can go in here and take a small, not a big one, just a small mitre on the inside corners here, just to prevent those fibres from breaking when you push the full width of your chisel from your knife wall, just to pare down the fuzz from those shoulders. I think the fuzz means police, does it? Does it still mean that? We're cutting down on the fuzz here. All right. Now, you know what I'm going to do? We're going to whiz through this. Watch this. That chisel is just riding. What happens with a chisel when you sharpen, after you've sharpened and it's been used for a while, the flat face gets broken edges on this face and it doesn't quite get to the surface and you end up having to lift up a little bit. So you want to make sure you stay on top of this, especially when you're working on this pristine work. This is not like notch in a gate, although in my view that's still important. Got some Brits on there. So make sure you stay on top of sharpening. This is so important. See, it just takes 2 seconds really. What is it? A minute to sharpen a chisel like this? I wonder how many of you were counting then. This ritualistic thing every time. So that's ready again now. Done that one. Just take these down here. Not much really to that. Chisel the inside corners. That's so nice now. Just transform my chisel then. No machines, no torment grinders, just get on with the job. Fast, effective, and beautiful. Oh yeah. You feel so good when you've put things in order, don't you? As good as it gets. So here, I don't have a hole to fit it to yet. I can do this one face with the router to get this initialized face down and down to the gauge line. So I can do that. But beyond that, I'm not going to do the back one until I've got a hole to fit it to. Can't fit the hole to the tenon. So you have to do it the other way. So there's my face, where is it? There's my face mark down there. So that's the first one done. So I'm dead on that line there, dead parallel to this outside face. When this fits there, it's going to be perfectly fitted to the surface, I believe. Same on that one. So those are done. Set this aside, not too far away, because we use that to put this together. You have everything marked on. This is my outside face, my front face. Knock this apart. I don't think I can do it that way. Come out. I've got my face mark here, my face mark here, so these go together face to face like this. Put this in the vise like this. Get everything lined up. So I'm working on my shoulder lines here. There. Now I've got to deduct. So this is my top rail and this is my top mortise. So this one is going to go in this way. So I'm going to use this now to gauge equidistance at this in the middle of the rail. Now I'm not going to give you measurements here because yours may well be different because you use different size wood or some variance came into place while you were doing this. So I'm dead center there. I'm going to use a knife, but you can use a pencil if you prefer. Just using a knife on either side. Then I'm going to bring this and I'm going to line this inside face up with that knife line, and that's going to give me the position of my mortise hole here and here, which is 1/4 of an inch in from that line anyway. Now these two can go across together, so that gives me the position of my mortise holes. So that should put me exactly centered. I'm going to go here on these two extremes. That's the width of my perpendicular. I'm going to just put in a thin knife wall, not a knife wall really, just a knife mark in this case. And that's the difference between a knife mark and a knife wall. Is two different things used for different purposes, but they often come together to give a delineation, a certain marking point. So that's where I draw the line. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to check here again on this outside face. I'm going to check here. I'm going to check here before I do any cutting, because I do want this to be dead centered. I don't want any mistakes. Oops. Outside face, the face of this goes against the outside face, because I'm going to now chop down there with my 1/4 inch chisel to create the mortise hole. And I'm only going to go 3/8 deeper than the bottom of my groove, so this is a very fast process. There's my first cut, second, and I just move away in increments of maybe 1/8 of an inch. Keep my chisel aligned with the guide. Now I don't want to go too deep. It doesn't really matter if I do. It's not going to really weaken anything, but check my alignment with this that knife wall. Turn my chisel around, come back along and just break out those last fibers. This is going so quickly and so easily. That's it really. I'm going to take this out. I'm going to clean out the waste wood with a smaller chisel. You've heard all this before, I know, but I have to keep saying it just to make sure. So I know I have enough depth. I'm sure I do. I do. I have a 1/16 of an inch spare back in the vise, just to clean up that edge. And that mortise hole is really ready now. There's nothing else. I'm not going to take anything off the mortise hole now. Generally I wouldn't. Maybe just a slight trace sometimes if it's to fit the tenon. So that's that one. I'll cut the other one when you're not here, because now I'm going to fit the tenon into this one. This is my top rail, this is my front face, and I have left this well fat, but if I turn this around you'll see that this is aligning pretty much with that front face. I don't think you can probably see as clearly as I can. There's a little piece of wood there holding me off. So now I just fit this tenon into here. So I'm looking for how close I am. Pretty close. Can I just use the same setting on the router? I don't know. I'm just going to try it and see. So I'm taking off just the outer 1/8. can you see right there? I took that outer face of that 1/8, and I'm going to try this now just to see how close it is. It looks like it's spot on, so I'm going to go with confidence there. If it was loose, would it matter? I think it does matter. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. You'd be disappointed if it didn't fit. But in terms of its structural value, it would probably be just fine, because the main frame is so strong. The whole of this frame is so strong. It's very nice. Okay, so this goes here. This is going to go this way. Right in between. It's just, I think it's just a bit too tight. I'm going to give it a little tap. I think that's too tight. So I'm going to take a little bit more off the back edge. Now I could take it out of the mortise, but that's not a good practice generally. So I'm going to take this down a bit more. One thing I didn't do, it's probably easier with a chisel, is just to take off the corner here to give it a bit of a leading edge in. And off the corner. This just eases this into the mortise hole, usually. I want this tight if I can get it tight. Still too tight. Got a couple of fibres on this outside edge here as well. That's good. So each one of these is just a little bit more fitting every time. And there you have it. A little bit off square there. There we go. So I've got good, clean, tight shoulders. I'm flush on the front, flush on the back. I don't need to plane that at all. It fits perfectly. And now I'm going to do the same to this inside of this one, and then we'll get back together and assemble this.